noticed that in your plans there's no update on sex education program or what is the community's plans on sexuality issues. Can you share this?
The CSE is only one of very many programs that we have, and we've done our review of it. We stand by the objectives, which is to provide young people with information for them to make their choices, and to protect themselves and their well-being. Our focus this year is going to be on the State of the Nation's Women's Report, and the point that I would like to make is that the ATI is continually developing new programs. So since the CSE has got into all that controversy, which is really very sad and very unfair if you press me to say it, it's no point keeping on at it. So we'll put it aside for a while. There is some plans to develop it into a program for parents and teachers. But we're not in a hurry to do that. In fact, there's something else which is quite... You see, the thing about our program is whatever it is, what is important to aware is that it deals with a need that is out there. So when we started the CSE 2 years ago, it was a response to the need out there. There were newspapers report on the difficulties that young people are facing in terms of sex. So right now, the sexual harassment study that we did last year, the results have come in, and one of the things that we have been saying since the results came in was that there is no laws, and there's also no precedent policies. Companies, even if you have to go there and get the companies to recognize that there is a need to provide a clause to safeguard sexual harassment from happening in your company. You've got to get them to recognize that. But after you've got them to recognize that, then what? They don't know what they're meant to do. They don't know how to do it, and I think we are now developing a program that would go out to companies to show them what is the way. I think, Karina, maybe you want to add to this because you're, the sexual harassment package.
I think I'd like to add 2 points, actually. I mean, the thing about the CSE, and one really good thing that came out was that it became an issue. It became this whole thing about what should be in our child's comprehensive or sexuality education was something that became an issue for the public. And I think then the Ministry of Education then said, well, it's not good enough to have just abstinence-only programs, right? And what we found when we first started this was that it was abstinence-only programs. And so we thought we have to do more and really recognize that when you tell a child don't do, they will probably do more. So then you have to say, how do you protect yourself? But now that the ministry has come out with that, and they are now reviewing all the providers, and I suppose this would be one of their principles, then maybe we don't have to really do it. So, it's also good to just see whether there is a need. But, I mean, it is from our talks with younger girls, it really does seem right now that many young girls and boys just do not practice safe sex. I think you can say that as a matter of fact. So hopefully, with the ministry's involvement, comprehensive sexuality education will be much, much stronger in Singapore. And the sexual harassment project is quite an interesting one, because if you go to any company and you say, if you had a molest case, how would you deal with it? A lot of people wouldn't know how to deal with it. There are many aspects to this. You have, firstly, at least 2 versions of what happened, and how do you ascertain? And people always say, the law is always in favor of the girl, right? But that's not really true, and it's actually a really tricky situation. Then you have how do you deal with the morale of the company? How do you deal with PR outside the company? And how do you deal with the victim? What happens to the perpetrator, the victim, etc. So you're looking at legal, HR, psychological, counseling, social work sort of issues, and there is no one provider of all this under one roof, and that's what we are going to do. We are after our sexual harassment study, which showed that 54% of the respondents, a small study, but 500 respondents, had actually experienced sexual harassment in their companies, right? Which was a really high number. I thought it would. I've experienced it myself, and I did think it was going to be an issue, but 54% is extremely high. So that would be an area that we want to focus on.
Madam Chair, may I comment?
Yes.
I think one of the things that you would have noticed over the 25 years is that AWARE has been a catalyst. And even in the CSE program, AWARE has been a catalyst because now the ministry is looking at changing what they have been promoting thus far. So any program everywhere that we have touched in the progress of women in Singapore, AWARE has been a catalyst. Because we were always the first to raise an issue which concerns women.
Thank you.
When was this sexual harassment report done?
Last year. It's on the website, the findings of the report.
June 08.
June 08. Very soft. Very soft.
Yes. Exactly to say that.
So are you excited about our programs or not?
If there are no more questions, if there are really no more questions, then we
Wrap up.
have no need to sit here anymore.
Sorry, following on the second one, there's also outstanding issues like to allow male women to be home and things like that. Were they ever decided on?
No. I mean that's an old issue. That's whether or not to
Constitution changes.
the constitutional changes.
Maybe I say something about the constitutional changes. This is an interesting point, not so much about the male members, but we have already put in progress a set of constitutional changes which are actually quite extensive. And these are now being submitted to the relevant authorities for their approval. But they do not allow male members to stand on the exco or to vote. That still remains the situation. Of relevance is that they would actually prevent a situation like 2nd of May from happening again. So one is that the new constitution provides for only members who have at least 2 years experience in AWARE to stand for election, right? And the second is that it gives the board a right to actually sack or expel any member who acts against AWARE's interests, right? Or who doesn't act against AWARE's objectives.